Well, good morning. Afternoon. Actually, it's noon. I hope all of you are doing well on this Saturday. Let me pause this and this one as well. Sorry about that. Getting a little feedback. So, very serious stuff happening today that I'm going to cover because the reason why this started on this channel in the first place was with a video that was the coming collapse of the dollar, if you recall. That collapse is very much in motion. Now, you have to understand the economy. You have to understand how a fiat currency actually functions. You have to understand what reserve banking is. You have to understand every complexity about this system that the United States has built. Now, this system is precisely why I have such an issue with this country, because we knew what we were building. We knew what we were establishing. We knew what we were sacrificing in 1913 when we allowed this to take place. We are paying the price right now for the things that we have done. And if you think that this is just the single thing that we have done that is bad for not just us as people that happen to live in this country, that were born here. Now, if you chose to come to this country, you're going to probably feel much more duped when everything falls, because when it does fall, you're going to learn just who this country really is. Now, that's not to say that this country started off with that intent. I don't believe it did. But it quickly gave in, and it was being manipulated all along. So you have to wonder the depth of knowledge that the founders of this country actually knew, considering the likes of them were probably the highest in the Masonic order that you can obtain. So before I get started, I will say hello to some folks here. I will say hello to Rachel James, Divine Renegade. Good to see you. FD2L 2017, love you. Lavera Lucchini, good to see you. Corey Ellis, Lawrence Foster, Ann Walsworth, Stanley Rakowski, Ann Walsworth, I said that already. Sean Unruh, Debbie Bell, Cheryl Flanders, Jason Bastelli, Wawa, hello back to you. Yamazaka Wins, hello to all, and hello back to you as well. William Wilson, Emilio Polanco, Satori, TC, Donna Wojtovich. Sir, wow, there's a whole bunch of new names here. A lot of new names. So, for those folks that are new, if anybody is expecting me to respond to YouTube tit for tat, stupid, silly stuff, I don't do that. There is when we do things like that, we allow ourselves to enter into a extremely low frequency. When you even acknowledge hate or disdain or all of that, you become that, because now you're participating. You're giving legitimacy to something that isn't real. The minute you acknowledge its reality, it becomes real. You are a creator. So once you confirm it, so you can see that that is the agenda of people that seek attention so greatly that they will even cause chaos. So you will see them as important. That's the same reason why a person goes and shoots up a school, because he wants to be known, because he can't find it in the world. He is insignificant. So damn it, he's going to make himself significant. It's just our sickness. And we can't look at people and judge them, because we've all been sick and we all remain to be sick. As long as we're in this, as long as we're in this physical world, we will remain to be sick, and we will battle with that sickness every day and every second of every day. So it's incredibly important for us to not fall for these traps. But let me explain something. Knowing what is going to happen allows you to confront it right now before it actually happens, that you can come to terms with these things before it happens, which is why Christ spoke that and said, I'm telling you all these things so you know that what I said was true. So that when he said something that they couldn't necessarily confirm that has to do with faith, that's something that they could confirm that takes place in the physical space that would then prove and articulate back to these folks that what he was saying is true. You can only go by the fruits, and the fruits are never what somebody says. The fruits are what you actually do, not what's said, not what is perceived, not as what somebody sees through their side of things. So you must rely on the things that are tangible, that are seen, not the unseen when you're talking about things that take place on this planet. But understand that they always have something to do with the spiritual first, and then they manifest themselves in the physical. This is why somebody attacking or somebody saying something, the minute you respond, the minute the attention of people is drawn to it, it builds an archetype. And that's what 9/11 was all about, getting everybody to understand that the world was going to change dramatically. So you expected it. They pushed this. Why? Because they know the human condition. They're very familiar with it. And they want you to accept something before it happens so you don't panic. So just like I've always said, whatever is the Father's is also corrupted and utilized by the enemy. The enemy has weaponized the most powerful aspect of us as humans, which is our ability to create. As crazy as it sounds, your imagination is incredibly powerful for manifesting things. That once you get involved, which is why Christ said, where two or more are gathered. And actually in the original text, it's when two or more deities are gathered. So two or more of us, because we're those children, those guys, those people that have this spark. Yes, that spark. That spark is your ability to create, which is the image or the reflection of the Father, the Creator, the source of all things, So if he created a truth, the enemy can only turn it into a lie because he can't tell the truth. So with that said, we're going to go through something right now that is taking place as we speak. Are you reading about it in your mainstream media? Absolutely not. Are they hiding it? Yes. Have they posted it and written stories about it? They have. They simply bury them. But this story, what I'm going to talk to you about, is the most important thing you can know right now, because it is the most immediate thing that is going to impact your life dramatically, far, far bigger than you can imagine, much bigger. What is going to take place is going to dramatically impact every single element of your life because of how much of it is integrated into you. And we're going to get to that. And I'm going to then break down at the end of this, we're going to break down the potential impact of what it has on your life on a daily basis. Even deeper than what you're thinking about right now, and probably deeper than what you're thinking about when we watch these things. So I'm going to play some videos and we're going to talk about them. Now, the first video that I'm going to play is by Glenn Beck, who we all know is a very big Zionist. But we have no idea whether he is a Zionist within truth or just somebody that believes that he's doing the right thing, like most people do in the church evangelicals, when they're supporting a Zionist state. They have no idea what they're actually causing and bringing. So I'm going to play Glenn. Why? Because Glenn Beck, out of all of the people, regardless of whether I like everything he says, regardless of whether I agree, regardless of whether he's a Mormon, it doesn't matter. When he speaks the truth, I'll play that. When he speaks nonsense, I won't. It's that simple. The same thing goes for anyone. I don't care who you are. You can be a proven liar. If you speak some truth, it's still true. That doesn't mean that you lie 100% of the time. So when you are going to tell the truth, because the liars do tell the truth and they also tell you the lie. So I'm going to play Glenn. And when I play Glenn, the reason why I'm playing him is because he understands the financial systems extremely well. He has been researching this and the Federal Reserve and everything for a very long time. So he has come to terms with Jekyll Island. He understands where it comes from. But what he hasn't grasped is the depth of the spiritual impact, the depth of the personal impact that our financial system actually has on dictating what happens to us, and more importantly, how we think and how we act. That the minute somebody seeks this money thing, the minute they do, it changes the direction of the heart and the mind to follow the path of that currency, of that. You are what you eat. You will live. You will absolutely live according to that feeds you, which is why we have sacrificed our lives for $1, and they knew it, and they tell it to you right to your face by putting "In God We Trust" on the dollar, telling you that this is your new God, because this new God feeds you. This new God takes care of you. This new God makes you popular, even if you're a moron, even if you're an angry, nasty human being. The more money you have, people automatically assume that, well, he's got to have done something right. He's got $1 billion in the bank. He's much better than I am. I can promise you, not many people have friends that are billionaires. I've got a few, and I've known a lot of people worth a lot of money. And I can promise you one thing: none of them are happy, and none of them were smarter than any other person I ever knew. And that includes you. They're simply picked because they do the bidding of the dollar. I've done it, so I can't say they're evil people. I can say that the actions are the fruits that they are producing, the things that they've gravitated towards, the sacrifices that they've made in their life in order to accept something as a true value when it has no value. This is critically important when you understand what is taking place right now. And they are doing this right in your face. The reality, everybody remembers the mortgage meltdown of 2008. You remember what it did to our economy. It caused this massive recession. Of course, they'll never tell you that we're in a depression again, because they don't want a run on the banks until they intend to create a run on the banks. And I can help you understand what that is later on. But what they are doing right now is they are propping up their false power. Their false power is collapsing. That dollar is collapsing right before our very eyes, and they are doing everything they can to prevent it from happening. Now, this is how dramatic this was. During 2008 mortgage fall, we had the mortgage meltdown, and you saw the stock market went to hell in a handbasket. All of that took place because of something that is called repo. So this is an agreement that banks make between each other. And the reason why I'm going to play Glenn Beck on this is because Glenn does a really good job of explaining to you how this functions, so I don't have to say it all over again. So I'm going to start with Glenn Beck, and we're going to listen to this, because I'm telling you, when you fully grasp what is going on right now, you're going to understand. If you remember TARP, right, the bank bailouts that they did, that took place over years, that they injected billions upon billions upon billions of dollars into these banks to save the banks. Well, that was just a few banks at the time. Right now, that very same thing is taking place with every bank. This is a printing of money. What gives money its value, because it doesn't have anything of real value that backs it, like gold or anything. It only has actually us. It's backed by the full faith and credit of us, the people. The full faith, your belief in that dollar gives it its power. That belief in that dollar is not being shown because people aren't spending the dollar, which when they spend money, it indicates that they believe in it because it's the action of it. So follow along here. I know this is hard. It's hard to grasp sometimes, but just follow along. So we lend it its value, but it really has no value. So when you stop believing in it, you stop spending it because you don't know what's going on. And as a result, the indicator of belief or faith that gives the dollar its value begins to wane. They need to find ways. Now, Would they give you the money and let you spend it and buy things you need? No, of course not. They don't do that kind of thing. They don't care about you. They give it to their banks. So the banks can then loan you that money quickly and easily. They need that money to be spent as fast as they can. Now, these loans that the Federal Reserve are giving the banks today, as Glenn will explain here, you're going to begin to understand it. It's a loan overnight, but it's a loan backed against securities and equities and mortgages that those banks hold. Essentially, all of the properties of everything. I'm going to get to that in more detail when we watch Glenn here. So let's pay attention to Glenn. Pay very close attention to what he says, because it's more important than you know.
Repo madness. What was happening in the banking community, and if you paid attention yesterday on what was what we were talking about and what was happening, there was a problem at the banks where they have this overnight lending system, and all of the banks have to have a certain amount of cash on hand. And they do this every night. They look and say, how much money do we have in the bank? You know what? Call Citibank and ask them if we can borrow, $10 billion. We'll sell them this and we'll buy it back tomorrow morning. Happens all the time. Banks loan each other money all the time.
So it's an overnight loan that has to be paid back the following day. Now, what this has to do is with reserves. Because a reserve bank, they must maintain a certain portion of cash. The bank, the individual branch, needs to maintain a certain portion of cash, a percentage of the overall money that has been deposited. The reason why they need this cash is in case you come to withdraw it. So, give you this scenario, and I'll go back to here while I explain this. When you deposit $1,000 into the bank can then lend that $1,000 to other people in the bank. They can do it multiple times. So they can loan, depending on the bank and depending on which system it's actually on, which ultimately is on a single system, depends on a different percentage. But primarily about 90% of that $1,000 you deposit can be lent to 10 other people. So they can lend $10,000 based on your $1,000 deposited. Now, if you and all the 10 people that borrowed that $1,000 went to the bank and say you were their only customers and you went to the bank to withdraw all of your money, they wouldn't be able to supply it because they only have $1,000, your money, and they've lent $10,000 to 10 others. So they wouldn't be able to. So that's a bank run. When the bank does not have money, guess what happens? People lose faith in that dollar because the banks don't have it. And the bank represents your dollar, the storage of it. When you put it in there, you assume that it's there, but it's really just numbers on a screen. The cash on hand is only for people that come to withdraw. So they try to prevent that withdrawal, that run on the banks where everybody rushes to the bank to take out their cash, because the bank will only have on hand 10% of their overall value. So if $1 billion has been put into that bank in actual cash, they only have a requirement to maintain 10% of that in cash. But that number has to be met at closing every single day. So those banks must have the money that could be then given to you if a certain portion of people came to withdraw their money. They have to maintain this cash on hand. And when they don't have that cash on hand, they will borrow that cash. They will borrow it from another bank. When there is no bank that will lend it to them because they're too risky, because their bank is in trouble, well, then you go to the Fed during a discount window, which is what he's going to describe here. So let me get back to Glenn and let you see this.
Now, back in 2008, Bear Stearns started asking for money, and the other banks were like, now you're asking for an awful lot of money. I'm not really sure you're too healthy. And so they started going to what was called the discount window, where they could go to the Fed in the middle of the night. But nobody wanted to go to the discount window because the discount window was really It was the walk of shame. If you went to that window, the other banks would know that you were in trouble. So Bear Stearns went to the discount window, and the Fed said, "Okay, we'll write you some cash, okay, just to keep them afloat, just to keep everything going. But don't worry, nothing to see here, nothing to see here." As the crash started to happen, there was a credit crunch. Not with you. The banks, you could still, everything seemed normal, kind of like, I don't know, right now, where everything seemed normal. But at night, the banks were in full-fledged panic.
So right now, as we speak, when the banks close tonight, even, they will be in massive panic. They are in deep, deep trouble right now. And this is articulated by what we're about to show you, where we know for fact that it's happening. This isn't speculation here.
Because they had to have a certain amount of money in the bank every night to cover everything. And what normally goes on is Bank of America will call Citibank, or Citibank will call JP Morgan Chase or whatever, and they'll work it out. And they say, "Hey, can you just transfer some of your money, and I'm going to transfer this asset over to you, and then tomorrow we'll reverse that." Not a problem. Until every bank in 2008 was freaking out because none of them had enough money to cover their expenses. And the first sign of trouble is the overnight interest rate, which should be 1.75. The overnight interest rate when the bank goes and says, "Hey, I want to buy a new house." Except what they're really saying is, "Hey, I don't have enough money in my vault to cover the stuff that I just bought. Can I borrow some money for the overnight?" And the banks say, "Sure, 1.75. The credit crunch became so bad as of Monday that the interest rate that the banks were selling each other these loans for the overnight was 10%.
10%. Now, let's just explain what that means, because they're securing these loans. Now, this is banks lending banks money. We're going to get to the next stage of this, because it's not banks lending banks money anymore. It's the Federal Reserve lending banks money. The overnight interest rate being 10% is significant, because let's say it's $1,000 again. Well, that $1,000 the next morning is going to cost $1,100 to pay back. It's an overnight loan. 10% for an overnight loan is money sharking, full stop. Is loan sharking, no question about it. But on top of that, if they cannot pay back that loan, then the properties that they had, the mortgages and the properties they own, possibly your house, possibly your business, possibly your building, that gets sold to them to pay back the loan, because they have secured it with it. It's what backed the loan. So they backed another loan or a mortgage that you actually own the deed on as the bank, but you're accepting payments from somebody that is living in it, thinking they own a home. So this is why your home loan changes hands, where you get a notification that says, "By the way, Chase is no longer owns your home. It's this bank over here." And then 6 months later, this bank owns your home loan. You're paying them. And it turns into a complete mess, and usually ends up in you not making the payment to the right thing or not registering, and they could care less. They'll put you in repossession of your home, and they will foreclose on your home, even if the problem was caused by them. So let me get back to Glenn and continue to listen to this, because he's going to get very, very specific here about what is taking place right now.
Imagine you borrow $10 billion from another bank in the overnight, and you have to pay 10% on that money. That's not going to go well or last long. And the reason why it was 10% was because no one had enough money. They were all calling each other. "Hey, could you loan me some money?" "I don't know. I can't. Of course, I'll find it if you pay me 10% in the morning." That's what was happening. So the Federal Reserve knew this, And so they just casually made an announcement. Hey, nothing to see here, nothing to worry about, but we're going to loan $55 trillion, billion dollars, $55 billion to the banks tonight. And we're just going to do it tonight. Well, it came back that the banks needed $65 billion for the night. Then the next night, the Fed decided to do it again, and so they offered $65 billion. Well, they needed $75 billion. Every time they opened the, quote, discount window, every time they made these purchases of assets. By the way, they're not paying them back the next day. They're just buying these assets. Every time they did that, they needed more. So they kept doing it. Remember, this is only going to happen Monday night. They did it again last night. They've done it Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, and they're going to do it again tonight. So that's where we were. That's what I told you yesterday. This is so critically important that you pay attention. Mm-hmm. So where are we? Well, the $75 billion per day from the Fed extended last night into day 4. We are now at $350 billion that has been injected into the U.S. investment banks in 4 days.
By the way, that is now $450 billion because of last night.
And the banks are still asking for more. The markets are not functioning. If the banks need $75 billion a day in new cash just for their day-to-day operations, JP Morgan Chase has taken $52 billion in cash and new capital from the Fed in 3 days. That is 22% of what the entire company is worth. That's their market cap.
So think about that. These banks are asking for money for a loan overnight that represents, in some cases, more than 20% of the entire value of the bank. What's going on? I'm going to explain what's going on and why that is important for you to know.
22%, and they borrowed that cash or took that cash in 3 days. The world's largest investment bank needing $12.5 billion every day in newly printed cash from the Fed to provide cash on the books. In 2007, the initial bid from Lehman Brothers was $620 million. 6 days later, a 120-year-old company, 11,200 employees, 8.9 million investors, worth $14 billion in market cap, was gone. We have a problem here. We have a real problem. In 4 days, they have given out almost half of what we argued about. We argued all week long, that week when we had to rush this through. It was the thing that caused the Tea Party really to stand up. Wait a minute, you're bailing these banks out. What about everybody else?
Okay, so let me just emphasize what he just said. The thing that caused the massive movement of the Tea Party in and of itself was the TARP bank bailouts that took place over the course of 5 years of bailouts, where this money was given over the course of 5 years. Now, what he said, in 4 days, they're almost half. In 5 days, they are more than half of what they spent on TARP for bank bailouts. In 5 days, they're more than half of that. Do you understand what I'm saying? And nobody is talking about this. This is not on mainstream media, and I'm going to show you right now, just so you can understand. Nowhere on Drudge Report. Nowhere on CBS News, not in a headline. Nowhere on ABC News. It's nowhere. The Wall Street Journal, you actually have to search this. It's not even on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, although it's the most important economic news of our entire lives. There is nothing bigger. You have to search, and then they have it behind a paid story. So you have to actually pay Wall Street Journal to know that this is taking place, because you're not going to find it on the front page of anything else, and you're not going to find it on Wall Street Journal. They're not going to send you an email. There were no email notifications for that story, yet there are notifications for every other story. So I want to go back to Glenn here, but I want to help you understand that the entire Tea Party was started for something like this. We had to go to Congress, and it was this massive bank bailout and massive arguments and debates over this thing. It was not an easy thing to do, but now somehow they can just do this out of nowhere. And then what this essentially is called quantitative easing. It's an easing of pain to make people feel like the dollar is worth more than it is, and to cover up the fact that it is falling. In other words, it's not just your belief in the dollar that makes it function. The majority of it is the bank's belief in the dollar that makes it function. And more importantly, the other countries' currencies that utilize our US dollar as the single backing currency for all of it. The entire world's economic system is hanging in a balance. People go, oh, the US is in deep trouble economically. No, the planet is. Every single country that we have forced onto our dollar system, we have forced them onto the central banking system and utilizing our dollar, this petrodollar that finances all of the wars, all of the oil, everything comes as a result of that. Everything. This is a business, folks. This country is a corporation, not you. There are two of you in this country. There is a corporation asset with your name, and then there is a real live birth of you being born onto this soil. And being born into this soil has nothing to do with being born into this evil government. And anybody that says they know the truth and speaks truth and trusts this government knows no truth whatsoever. Anybody that trusts law enforcement today, if they knew the truth, they would never do such a stupid thing. They would never get their mind. It means that they are sold. They are so hopelessly dependent upon the system that they become the agent, just like in the Matrix. They are not free. And that's how you know they never were freed from the Matrix, ever. They've never had a genuine experience. And they're jealous of anybody that has. So let me finish with Glenn Beck here, because it gets, there's only about a minute and a half left of him, and I've got somebody else I want to show you too, because they're echoing it, and I think you'll appreciate it.
They're doing it now quietly, and they've already spent half of the cash that they spent for TARP, and they did that in 4 days. And no one is talking about it. There is a real problem with the banks. We're not talking just Lehman Brothers now. We are talking all of the banks. But wait, let's talk about blackface. Wait, there's rain in Houston. You know, it's climate hysteria day. We've got to get Trump's tax returns in California. Oh, we've got to get all of the ARs back. Don't you even say that we're talking about confiscating ARs. We're not talking about that. Yes, you are. No, you're not. Yes, you are. No, you aren't. Meanwhile, the banks are in trouble. Are you awake?
Okay. I'm going to now go to True News, and I'm going to play some from True News. But are you awake? This is really, really, really serious stuff. Because what happens as a result of the collapse of these banks comes the collapse of the dollar, which I've spoken of. It is coming. It is a reset. It's not something that they can prevent. It's something that they've planned. Because what is taking place in these loans? When the federal government lends this $75 billion, it's not like the bank where if they don't pay it back the next day, they're not even allowing it to be paid back. They're not paying back the Federal Reserve the money. The Reserve is taking in exchange for that cash properties, assets, mortgages. This is a value suck. The Federal Reserve, the people that own the world, they own and run everything. They are now sucking up all of the properties so they can say, we own you now. You no longer have a constitution like you thought. And you're going to accept this because we can never allow this to happen again. One country cannot back a dollar and be the sole currency. So you must accept a single currency that will come from a single centralized bank, run from a place and governed from a place, I don't know, over there in the Middle East, with a group of 70 in the Sanhedrin that will judge. And trust me, 99.9% of all human beings in this country that believe they're patriots, that believe they're Christians, that believe that they are honest and truthful and that they know the truth, they are going to be so easily led into this that in the absence of having any food, in the absence of even being able to pay for your home, in the absence of everything that is structured in your life, they will accept anything that puts a nugget of food in their mouth, thus sacrificing their rights of what they have, sacrificing. They are sacrificing everything for a bowl of soup. They are being misled to do just that. This is where all these scriptural stories come from. So I'm going to play True News right now because it's True News. Rick Weil is talking about this, and they're going to discuss it. But what they're going to articulate is what I'm talking about now. But they're going to tell you a little bit more about how long the Fed is going to do this. Because remember, we said that they're at half of TARP, which was $550 billion or roundabouts there. This is going to go into October. And when you know when it ends, I'm going to bring something up because a year ago in October, I did a video about a coming reset because of dates and numbers that they follow. Well, it was off a little bit then. It's not off today. So I'm going to get to that in a minute. So remember that. The numbers associated with the dates. But let's play True News here and listen to Rick Weil because I'm telling you, these guys are waking up. Other people are waking up to this. This is far more serious than you can imagine. And you know that by them starting wars and saying, oh, we're shipping soldiers to Saudi Arabia and all of this other distraction. And Trump did XYZ with a foreign leader and stupid stuff. Things that mean nothing, just like Glenn Beck was talking about. They mean nothing. Who cares about the president? We all know that he actually doesn't make any decisions on behalf of this country. We all know that the banks that are running the show right now demand how he acts and how he reacts. He's a puppet for the bank because he is a luster of money. He seeks power. He seeks money. He's an arrogant guy. You think he's doing good things for this country. He's not. He's just a puppet for the cabal. So let's play Rick Weil here, and you'll hear a little bit more about this because I think Rick is very articulate in how he describes to you what this really means.
This is True News. I'm Rick Wiles. Something I've learned over 20 years of hosting True News is that the most important news story is the one that is not dominating the headlines of newspapers and TV news networks. Today's news media obsession is whether President Trump asked the government of Ukraine to investigate possible corruption by Hunter Biden, the son of former Vice President Joe Biden. Mr. Biden's possible corruption doesn't upset the news media. They are outraged that President Trump asked Ukraine to investigate it. It's the dominating story on every news channel in America. But is it truly the most important news story today? In my opinion, the big story that all of us should be watching is this short article published by the Wall Street Journal this morning on Friday. It said, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York will offer to add at least $75 billion daily to the financial system through October 10, prolonging its efforts to relieve funding pressure in money markets. In addition to at least $75 billion in overnight loans, the New York Fed said in a news release that it will also offer 3 separate 14-day repo contracts of at least $30 billion each next week. The Wall Street Journal went on to say the Fed will conduct further operations as needed after October 10. On Friday, banks asked for $75.5 billion in reserves, $550 million more than the amount offered by the Fed, offering collateral in the form of Treasury and mortgage securities. The Wall Street Journal's article said the Fed's operation was the 4th time this week it has intervened to calm roiled money markets. Rates on short-term repos briefly spiked to nearly 10% earlier this week as financial firms looked for overnight funding. The actions mark the first time since the financial crisis that the Fed had taken such measures. Dr. Burkhardt and Edward Zoll are here to discuss the Fed's emergency actions, plus many more news stories from around the world. Gentlemen, that is a shocking news story.
Now, if you just take the $75 billion per day, Rick, it doesn't sound that big anymore, does it? I mean, just
to me it does. $75 billion.
But
the Fed is pumping $75 billion per day into the financial system to keep it afloat. That's big.
But it has already put in $425 billion just in the past 5 days.
Yes.
And if we're keeping this in place until October 10th, you know what that math takes you to? Nearly $2 trillion.
$2 trillion?
Yes, think about it. It's already up to about half a trillion. You got $500 billion already, $75 billion a day through October 10th. You're looking at $2 trillion. That's a big number then.
Oh my! I haven't seen anything like this since the days just before the collapse of Lehman Brothers in 2008.
And the Wall Street Journal subtly puts that, in the center of the end. Oh, this is reminding us of the last financial crisis. Hello, okay? That's a big deal. Every time our countries look down the barrel of the increasing debt, which we've mounted up through government malfeasance and the foreign wars and the funny money that we love to keep the economy high on here, we've had major turmoil at home, and even at times talk of martial law being declared.
That's right. I saw this story pop up on Wall Street Journal, CNBC, Bloomberg this morning.
Right.
Then when I went back late this afternoon, prior to coming out here in the studio, I couldn't find the story anymore. I'm talking about the financial news websites. They had removed it from the front page of their websites. Now, if you search for it, it would come up in the search. It wasn't like they deleted the story.
You had to actively search.
You had to search for it. So if you did not know that story was on the front page earlier this morning, around 11 a.m. Eastern, you would not know that it ever existed.
Right.
So obviously a message went out from somebody. Play this down.
We don't want
get it off the front page.
The average person to freak out.
We don't want people thinking about it all weekend.
They might take it seriously.
Right, and
they might do the math and figure out $2 trillion.
To help our viewers and listeners get a handle on what's actually going on here, banks sometimes have to borrow money when they're low on cash. Banks, financial institutions, they need it for a short-term loan, right?
So when they talk about repo market, they're not talking about repoing people's cars.
Right. No,
right? It's a repurchase of a bank is what, putting securities on the market overnight.
Right.
These are U.S. Treasuries.
It's a short-term borrowing for dealers in government securities, and the dealer sells government securities to investors. And again, as you notice, it's usually on an overnight basis, and then buys them back the following day.
Right. So the promise is that the seller is going to repurchase the securities the next day.
Right. So the idea is that usually they'll borrow 5 or 10 billion, and that'll just be a bridge. But earlier this week, we saw numbers of 50, 75 billion being borrowed, and then that there wasn't enough cash in order to meet the demand. And so then the Fed had to step in and start putting money into the system. For the consumer, this is the way it would work. Let's say that you're maxed out on your credit card, you've got mortgage payment, car payments due and everything, and you say to yourself, hey, I've got to get some money to buy groceries, right? So you go down a local check cashing place and you write out a check, and you give it to them. They're going to cash it a week later, and they give you cash. They're going to charge fee on top of that. Well, that's the same way it's working, except in this case, the check cashing place has run out of money, doesn't have any cash. And so they have to get it from somewhere. They have to borrow it in order to meet the demand. And so that's what's happening here, except in this case, they're going to the check cashing place every single day, and they're making $500 loans every single day to buy groceries for the kids. So they're finding themselves, the Fed can keep printing money. They're going to print $2 trillion worth of money. They're going to do whatever they can to keep the markets afloat. And so, but in real life, you can't do that. In real life, you can't get away with that.
That's a good analogy, Doc, because most of the public, myself included, we don't think about that every night while we're sleeping, the banks are borrowing money to operate the next day.
Right.
They're like drug addicts. If you really think about what you just noted here, that they don't even know a week from now sometimes if they're going to have the liquidity and cash to maintain operations. Operations, we think, hey, it's stable. I can go to the bank. I can use it for my paycheck to be deposited.
I put my money there.
Yeah, I put my money there. Isn't it safe?
Isn't my money in the bank?
And what do they use for security? They use treasury notes and what else? Mortgage securities. Now, what are mortgage securities? Well, these are promises made against big piles of mortgages, both commercial and,
big piles of mortgages, millions of mortgages on homes. So I think you've heard enough of that, but let's talk about the ramifications. What does it look like? It looks pretty bad. Just think about what you would do right now, this very second. Your ATM stopped working. The cash that you have on hand is the only cash you have. Now that's assuming that the person that you would spend that cash with actually believes that it's going to be worth money long enough, that it's going to be worth value long enough that he can get something in return of equal value. So the mere fact that the banks would collapse would make people not believe in the dollar. You have a massive calamity of belief, which is the single largest factor in the entire thing of having value. But these loans will keep going out, and they will keep buying them, and they will keep sucking up all of the properties until it owns literally everything. Everything that everybody else owns, every single bank, will be owned by the centralized banking system. So, who's going to be running the show? But what are you going to be doing? And what is the country and the world going to do as a result of such a financial collapse that is predicated upon because that is perpetrated because we allow it? So if you think that you get away with it and go, oh, it was the banks or it was our government. No. You've participated in your government. You've participated in the banks. The world is going to hold us, this country, accountable because we collapsed their world. If you think that World War II World War III is us going to war with Iran. Think again. It's a world war against the United States of America, the collapse of Mystery Babylon. We are the whore of Babylon. Babylon runs it. It's over there in that little place called Sanhedrin and Israel. They're running the show from there. Trust me on this. Anybody that says, no, it's not happening, well, you've never been around those people. Do you know them personally? Have you ever worked with them? So it's going to be very difficult for people to grasp that everything they thought. Now, everything is going to be challenged at that point. Everything, because God, essentially, the one that they've established as new, dies, and they've got to reinvent God. And you better serve him, because if you don't serve their new God, their new system, their new dollar, well, then you're going to be considered a rebellious person and not part of the solution. The world will want you dead because you're not willing to cooperate with this new evil system. That's how that works. That's where the social credit score comes in. You will be considered a person that is not willing to integrate all of these different little social ideas about you have to be a patriot, you have to love your country, all of those things. Being a patriot, why would you ever sacrifice your ability to criticize? When you become a patriot and you say, I'm a patriot, I love this country. Well, now it's pretty difficult for you to call out this country when it conducts some bullshit anywhere in the world. It's like the dual loyalty that people have when they're Israeli, but Americans too. They're supporting Zionism. They're supporting Israel. They will continue to support that more than they even support their own country or their own neighbors, because that's more important. That's God's. It is. Remember, everything is taken from the Father by the enemy and corrupted. Everything. The Father's chosen people and the enemy's chosen people. They're from the same group. It's not all of them. It's a very, very small group. They know exactly what's coming, and this is not going to get any nicer. So I will try to take a look in chat and answer questions. There's going to be more about this coming. I'm happy to talk about it as things change. I will try to keep you informed. But knowing and coming to terms with it, asking yourself these questions. What will you do if you can't do anything tomorrow? You won't even be able to drive across the country because you won't be able to buy gas. In the most extreme cases of this, you think about the basic things that you will lose. Your daily event, how that alters, how that changes, what you believe your future can be. Everything you think collapses. There are multiple collapses of our universe and understanding when you come into the truth. It is a continuous dying. You get something new and you die to that of the world. You get something else new and then you die to that. This is why we tell you of these things, so you can then confront it now, confront the enemy. Now, Malia and I are going to be doing a Red Letter Disciples probably today, where we're going to be talking about Jordan Peterson and showing some things of Jordan Peterson and what living in Christ looks like, because this is key to understanding how you actually survive this. And it's not about surviving physically, because honestly, if your mental state and your spiritual state is always intact, your physical state becomes irrelevant. And that's the whole point of practicing fasting and things like that, that you can learn to not give in to this fleshly demand, what it demands of you, what it says you must have. And people say, well, you need to eat. Well, actually, there's some sages out there in India that don't eat. So they live off of light, they say. And it's actually proven to be true. So that's a spiritual state that I still can yet to fully comprehend, but I do know it to be true. So getting to your chat questions, what is the best way to protect kids in these days ahead? You know, we always want to enforce positive thinking in our children. You know, I have two daughters that I absolutely adore. I have two grandsons, and we always want to instill something positive because we think that that's going to make them better. Well, I've learned with my kids, particularly my oldest daughter, that for me to withhold from her the truth is really weakening her ability to withstand things. That I can first help her understand how powerful she is individually, and then I can help her understand that none of this means anything external of her. Once she has a full, strong understanding of that, of knowing who she is, know thyself. When you know who you are, you know who you're not. And that is the most important thing that you can learn, is who you're not, because it shows you who you really are. And once you know that, none of this is scary. But it is serious to look at, because then I come to terms with how many people will fall for this. It brings to me the reality in a vision that you can now see what that would look like. And that is disconcerting. That's going to be the hardest thing for all of us, is watching people pay the price for their lack of knowing. That's going to be the hardest thing we can tolerate, is because we're going to watch people literally be consumed in this and fall. And people will look at us with a crooked eye and say, oh, those poor people, they're about to be beheaded. But we'll all do it with smiles on our face, because we know the difference. We're not of this world and they are. It's quite simple. It's really not rocket science. Let's see if there's any more questions. Debbie Bell, tell the truth. I've always told the truth. Debbie Bell, always have. That's how I can just walk about life and never have a concern. I don't need to look behind me. Somebody else thinks I didn't tell the truth. That's their perception of something, because everything I do is verifiable. It's all right in front of your face. I document everything. And I have Malia, who is really, really, really efficient at organizing stuff. She keeps track and keeps hold of everything, every receipt, all of that stuff. So yes, we always tell the truth. It's easier to remember. Let's see if there's any other questions. What do you think? Wake Up 711 says, what do you think starts this off? It's already started, Wake Up 711. That's the point. It's already started. The mere fact that they're not talking about it makes everybody believe it's actually not happening. But the government is going to spend $2 trillion between a few days ago and October 10th. October 10th. 10 October. 10, 1 and 9, 19, 10. 10, 10, 10. From a gematria standpoint, and let's say the bankers that corrupt the system, let's call it the Zionist political party, because that's what it is. It is a political party that is taking over politics and finance over the entire world in order to form their single party government, which is Zionism. And it isn't a religious doctrine. It's a political one, just like there is a political doctrine of the Quran, and then there's a religious one or a spiritual one. Just like there is a political document or a political belief system in Christianity, which is the Roman Catholic Church and Paul and Romans 13 and honor and love your government and trust them. They're God's people and all of that crap that people neglect to remember for whatever reason. There's one that is a political operation, which is a physical, and then there's one that's a spiritual. That's how you separate the scriptures. That's how you understand. One's political, that supports a foundation and an increase in power and involvement in a political structure in the physical world, and one is of the spiritual. And true freedom is humbling. True freedom is not having what the world sees as great and grand, but having what you see as great and grand, which is your peace within you and nothing more. Your crown, your understanding. It's so difficult to obtain. It is the most valuable thing you can have when you reach that in Christ in you. It is the only thing you need to be worried about. Let me see if there's any. Tony Higginson. Will they fake the second coming of our Lord and Savior? Of course they will. They're already doing it and setting you up for it. Catherine really says, go to the playlist on the channel, watch Alpha Omega videos. Yes. Thank you, Catherine, for always reminding people of that. Time Traveler says, hiding it from our eyes. Yes, but they're really not hiding it from your eyes. The fact that people think it's only valuable if people are talking about it, or it's only really true if the mainstream media is not talking about it. It's not even on Drudge. And Drudge, just go look. Let's just make sure. Now, I've known Matt Drudge a long time. And at one point, I believe that he was seeking truth. I think that he is very interested in keeping this really ridiculously simple web page into a massive $1 million making money machine, because he makes a ton off these ridiculous ads here because he gets billions of views. But yet he doesn't actually write any of the articles. The only thing that Matt Drudge does is writes a headline to somebody else's article. That's all he does. It's just an aggregation of links. And nowhere on here is anything about the Feds pumping. And it's kind of important. It's the single largest financial event in our history of what we know. And somehow it evades the press. But anybody will tell you it's a big something deal. What word to place there, that's up to you. So in saying that, we've got some work to do. You've got work to do and to think about this, to categorize it, to confront it. Divine Renegade says, I so can't wait for the White Rider. Well, Jackie Murphy says, hello, Derek. We are Canadian. How soon will this ripple affect us, or has it already? Of course it is. It's going to affect you, and it already is affecting you. They are already reacting. In fact, the banks that are calling on these are not just U.S. banks. They're also Canadian banks. You have less Canadian banks. In fact, the illusion of a Canadian bank is kind of weird because there really isn't a Canadian-owned bank. All of the banks are owned by banks. And when you get down to the layers of who owns what, it comes down to very, very few banks that own everything. And the reality of it is the Federal Reserve really owns all of them. But since they've separated the powers out in these corporate structures, they still have to filter all of the properties and all of the wealth back into their system before they can own it all again outright. So this is how they can legally or without notice obtain ownership of all the properties. So when they do decide to officially collapse things, which is what 10-10-10 means, 10 means final. Scripturally, from the Torah, from the Talmud, from the Kabbalah, from all of their gematria, it means finalized. It's final. When it says 10,000 of his holy ones, it's not 10,000 as a number. 10,000 just means thousands, way more than enough, a complete number. It just means complete. It doesn't mean a specific number. It just means complete. So 10-10-10, October 10th would be essentially the final day. And that's even if they do decide that. But on that day, I think you could expect something. So we'll see. Cosmic Colors, they will take the land even if you own it. Of course, because you actually don't own the land. That's why there's mineral rights and things like that, and you never really get to obtain your mineral rights. Well, if your house is built on the minerals and they own the minerals, well, they could say, get your house off my piece of property. Will this affect the conference, Nancy Smith says? I certainly hope it doesn't. It shouldn't unless there are no banks and people can't actually get here. But other than that, no, it should not. And those dates for the conference, it looks like November 1st, 2nd, and 3rd now. no longer October. This puts us back in actually a little bit better climate out here in this area. Everybody will be coming into Phoenix here. It looks like I'm just waiting for a final confirmation on a couple things to confirm the actual space, but it's going to be an outdoor camping style. We have an outdoor chapel and outdoor camping and campfires and things like that, plus indoor conference center. So, and would be staying at the location. So we're trying to make all of those arrangements right now. We do appreciate that. It's I've spoken to, as I said, guest speakers that will come to speak, and then we have each speaker that comes to speak, they'll speak, and then that person and I will sit and break down kind of what they said, and I can ask them questions, and also so can the participants at the event. So it'll be a really good Q&A session. Everybody's going to get to spend some time really asking some deep questions. People that are truly seeking will attend, and there are very, very few seats left. Like I said, there's under 10 right now. So if you wanted to attend, the link is still in the description box below, and there's a deposit that we have to give to the facility in order to secure it. So that's what that covers. Curtis Lee says the press does not want to be the sacrificial lamb for telling the truth. No, they don't. No fear, Christ is here. Fear is from the evil one. Yeah, you don't need to fear Christ. That's not it. It's a fear scripturally is a respect when it says fear God. That's simply a respect. Fear, in the translation that they translate into fear, is fear and trembling, which is absolute respect and adoration. It's not terrified. If you take it as terrified, well, then obviously that's the enemy. International Monetary Fund. Yeah, actually, Sean, the International Monetary Fund isn't the real head of the cabal. It's the Bank of International Settlements in Switzerland, which is why Switzerland stays the hell out of everything, doesn't engage in wars, because that's where all the gold is. That's where all the real value gets sucked up to, is there. When shit hits the fan here and around the world, you want to find the cabal where they're at. They're there. So it looks like, and more questions here. Zach says, Derek, Christ is king. Why are we worried? Christ is king. He resides right here inside of you. You're it. I'm not worried. I'm just helping prepare those so they can confront this before it happens. Otherwise, they'll be sucked right into the vortex of living through them, living through what they offer you. And once you accept that way of living, it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, for you to avoid it. You switch from core water to essential water. Yes, this is core. It's not bad. The ghetto consciousness, will gun ownership be outlawed? I'm certain it will. Something like that goes down, it will be obviously a completely different set of laws. It's going to be martial law. They will. There won't be anything from a constitutional standpoint that can be done. The Constitution is chosen to be honored and chosen not to be honored, because the Constitution doesn't regulate the things that take place within the corporation of the United States of America. All caps. The United States of America, when you see that and you see the American flag with the gold fringe, that's the maritime law flag that regulates the corporation. Maritime is trade, ocean trade, all of it, been around a very long time. It's old Roman and it's old British Empire, which is really one and the same. The Roman and the British Empire, it's how they regulated the world. Nothing has changed today. We are still under the power of Rome. Rome never fell. It was simply changed in its location and its name. Okay. Cherish Pearl. Yes, I agree. At all. Even a response in chat doesn't deserve or earn that. Rider on the White Horse says, ready to start kick ass for Jesus, bro. Well, it's going to be quite a different time, and we're going to get into some more serious things as we progress here, because what I will do now is be speaking more about ways where you can be prepared, what to expect from a physical standpoint, where you can be and what you can do during those times, and where others will be. That's going to be the important part. Jaden Foley says, if I wrote you snail mail, would you write me back, Derek? Yes, I write people back and comment back. Obviously, it's easier for me to respond in email than it is in paper mail. But I will absolutely write you back if it requires a response. If you want me to respond, if there's a real need for it. Lucy Garola says, "Will Santos be a speaker?" I'm really hoping he's agreed that he would be willing to come. It will depend on finances and how we organize the rest of this, because obviously we would have to pay for him to come, like we always do. Pay for him to come, pay for him to stay, pay for his food. So, he's not out anything in order to come, and try to make it beneficial that he could make the trek out here from wherever he's at right now. He is in the country. So that's what we're hoping for. Debbie Bell, it is so very good to see you again, Derek. Great show. Thanks so much, Debbie. Rider on the White Horse says, aren't we all superheroes? Yes, you are when you accept it and know who you are. Z-Dub says, will killing your neighbor be okay, or do we give up? Here's it'll be okay according to the rules. If that guy is trying to hurt you and you killed him, you would say, oh, the world says it's okay. The difference is, and this is the unknown, what do you hold against yourself as a result of that? Taking another person's life, hating your neighbor. It's not about you being judged by somebody else. So when you ask me the question, is it okay? I ask you, is it okay? Will you be okay with that? Because you can think, oh yeah, I'd totally be okay with that. Somebody was trying to hurt me. You know what? Even people that kill somebody that's trying to kill them is impacted by that because of the unknown. We believe that we're honoring laws, but we're not. All things seen as good will be bad. All things seen as bad will be good. Everything is already upside down. See any more questions that I can run through? The most important thing, Coriella says, is to be outside the urban centers. Yeah, you definitely don't want to be amongst the massive populations. He's in California, Heidi Cat says. Yes, I heard that he was in California, but I know that he was going to be traveling around. That's Santos we're speaking of. Jeannie said, presenting this video to my husband, Derek. Yes, this is actually this is a video that you can show anyone. Anyone. You don't have to talk to them about religion, but this is real. This is taking place right now. They can check it. They can find out, understand that we're going to spend $2 trillion in just the matter of a few weeks. $2 trillion in a couple weeks to banks. Now, if the government really cared and the Federal Reserve really cared about all of you at all, they would pay off your homes and give you your homes. And if they paid off every single home in this country and allowed you to live in it for free because you now own it with no mortgage payment, it would still cost them less than what they're about to spend and what they're spending. Less. They could bail you out, which would bail the banks out too, because if they paid off your home, well, the bank would also receive that money, right? So by giving it to you, they would be helping you and the bank. They don't have an interest in making that property your property. They have an interest in owning that property and taking it from you. This is where the strategy for the banks has changed. The banks used to never want to repossess or own the property itself. They just held it in ownership while you paid it, but they wanted to give it back to you. They never wanted to repossess it. They never wanted to foreclose on that loan. Today, they really don't care. because they just get the money from the feds. And they offer you your home loan because they want you to have that home because they really own it. Rider on the White Horse says, I guess I'm going to kick ass for Jesus by myself then. You've got a whole bunch of people right here. I think that they're already doing that. We're doing that as we speak. Let me see if there's any other questions. Bicycle rider forever. I'm going to answer this question because anytime anybody talks about taking their own life, it's an interest to me. Why can't I take my own life if I do not want to take the mark of the beast? Do not want to go to FEMA camps also. Why does it say will not go to heaven because of this? It doesn't actually say that. It doesn't say that at all. The reality is, again, this goes to you killing somebody. Are you going to hold it against yourself? If you held it against yourself and you weren't alive to release that karmic debt, so to speak, well, you're going to have a problem. It isn't that killing yourself is against the rules, because it really doesn't say anything. In fact, if you're a Pauline guy and you want to read Paul, Paul contemplated suicide and said so. He said, I haven't decided whether I'm going to kill myself yet or not, or whether I'm going to stay here or go. But for me, it's better to be here in Christ than it is to go, because I can talk to you about it. So a very truthful statement on his behalf. But taking your own life, why? Why would you commit that? Somebody else committing it, if they commit it because you won't accept their beast, their mark of the beast, then all of the weight of that is on them. Let others have that. You can beg them not to do it, but not for your life, but because it will be held against them. They will hold it against themselves, especially when all of the truth has been revealed, because you can bet your bottom dollar that all of the law enforcement and military will be executing people here in this country because it's their job. You know, they will, hey, it's my job. They told me I have to kill you. I really don't have a choice, because if I don't kill you, I don't make money and I don't eat and my family goes hungry. It's either you or my family. They're going to kill you. Now, what are they going to feel about themselves when it does come time to die of this flesh? When you die completely, what are you going to take with you? I don't want any of that, which is precisely why I don't get into silly, stupid lie debates and things. Don't engage in it. And we're going to talk about that more. Malia and I are going to talk about this Jordan Peterson video and a bunch of the ones that we've seen. Jordan's a really, really good man. And he means really well. And he's got some great things to say. And it doesn't, the good part about his speaking is that it comes from an intellectual standpoint, not a religious standpoint or even a spiritual one. So it's what he lacks that makes what he talks about so clear. Eventually he'll come into the complete spiritual aspect of it, although the truth itself has absolutely impacted his spirit, and you can see and hear his passion and know that he's being honest and truthful in what he speaks. Very, very good man. So let me see, get to one more question. So Joe S. says, Derek, please stop and speak of the coming chastisement. Can you please? Coming chastisement of which? Of being in Christ, the coming chastisement of who we are. I've spoken of that, is that when we no longer support our governmental systems, we're going to be seen as sacrilegious. We're going to be seen as somebody that isn't supporting humanity because they've got the solution. That's a human solution, not a humanity solution, because one, a human solution is going to come from a business, corporation, or a country that's going to entail requirements of you to be enslaved and to abide by rules that you necessarily don't want to abide by or shouldn't, because morally they go against everything that you feel inside. Yes, the USBs are still available. The link is, I believe, in the description box below somewhere. Let me see. If you come back to this video once it reposts, I will I'll include the link in there. It's not in there right now. but I will get to that. In fact, maybe I can do that right now inside the chat box. Interesting thing with the USBs, I just want to let everybody know. So apparently the post office is kind of messing with these packages a bit. The packages that have gone out, many of you have received them. The post office actually accepted the packages. They're the ones that I paid, and it was given at the counter. So all of it was approved mail going through, but we've received some packages back that are from states that are close by that says that there wasn't enough postage on it. Well, I mailed it at the post office, so the post office has that problem. But the amazing part is that they were all, the postage was the same for every single one of them. But yet the postage, with the same postage that goes, here in Phoenix or somewhere, also got packages where we've confirmed that they've come to Germany and Switzerland, and even in South America. One case I got an email today. People have received these thumb drives with the same postage, but yet Wisconsin was sent back to me that there wasn't enough postage. And we've received about 5 or 6 of those. I'm not sure if there's more today, but about 5 or 6 that were returned for not enough postage, but yet some got to, or even in Alaska. Catherine Willie got hers in Alaska, same postage. So something's not right. And if you haven't gotten it and they were returned, they will go back out again. I apologize. There's lots of weird things happening, just attacks from lots of different angles. But, know that we always maintain our peace. Of course, we always want your prayers. We always want your positive thoughts. We always want to be in communion with you in the spirit. Always want to, always want to maintain that. So if you feel that even though we might not notice it, that there are dark powers coming against us, you can pray against that. You don't have to tell me. Just go ahead and do it. It's good to see Scrub here. Good to see you, Scrub. Good to see Z-Dub. Dennis Pladmondon. Denise says, we need to start a nationwide network that can take food and necessary goods from their reserves and to store and distribute to the needy, and we'll let them in. Yes, I mean, that's really what we should be doing. We should be aggregating this stuff. It's something that I've been trying to put together behind the scenes. Let me see. Seeker's Journey. I received my thumb drive. Yes, good. So see, people are getting the thumb drives. Yes, keep your own crown, RJ Love says. Let no one take it. Absolutely not. Char Rosk, I'm feeling helpless. Don't feel helpless. You're anything but helpless. You're anything but helpless. The only thing you need is you. There is nothing else. It's just you. Patricia, you said you did not get yours. I guarantee those were sent out, so they may have been. In fact, I believe yours was one of the ones that was returned for lack of postage. So I'll make sure that goes back out, or lack of the proper amount of postage, which makes no sense whatsoever. Derek, have you seen the interview with X on Bear League Project with Russell J? No, I couldn't. I have not seen that. D. Tanya says, Mama B is doing great. She's making tons and tons of progress. She's doing incredible. Thank you so much for your prayers. Jaden Foley, how's Mama? Thank you again for asking. Yes, she's doing really, really, really well. Thank you all for supporting. Sarah C, missed the beginning. Yes, you're late, Sarah. Good to see you here. William Wilson, the second persecution is coming. Oh, it's going to get really bad, folks. You see, love the spirit talk, brother. We are one. Narrow Gate says, Dory Grace, Mama B. Yes, love Mama B. Hope family update. Oh, Catherine Willie just got here. Hey, Derek. 77 minutes late, Bert? Yes, the evil is definitely attacking us, Catherine Willie. I'm glad you got your packages up there. So just so you know, they were sent out. Zach asks if you go to hell if you commit suicide. I'm going to show that comment. That would mean that there would actually have to be a physical location of hell, and that's not necessarily the way it really is. You will live in it. So think about what really hell is. The descriptions are not necessarily it's a lake of fire, but fire is really an element. So that element can be, you can have fire in your soul, right? You can have that burning in your soul. That is all the same thing. So imagine the worst guilt or shame you could ever maintain. If you continue to hold on to that, you will hold that against yourself infinitely. And you'll have to return to this crap hole or something like it in order to fix it. It's your chance to get it over with now. Miles to go. Should I purchase an AR-15 for my go bag? Well, I wouldn't. I don't have a need. Somebody wants something of mine and they want it that bad, then they probably need it worse than I do. I accept whatever the Father brings is whatever the Father brings, which is why I don't react to silly things. Let me see. We create our own heaven and hell. Yes, and we are creators. It's what we do. And we're very powerful at doing it. All right, so I didn't want to go more than an hour and a half. I actually didn't even want to go more than an hour, so it's an hour and a half. Our weapon is truth. Yes, I wanted to say thank you to everybody. Jay Brand says, this attack is not normal. No. Sneaker's Journey, What Dreams May Come, a beautiful movie. Thanks so much. That was a lot of fun to make that movie. Gorgeous place. Everybody in it was awesome. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but maybe one day I'll tell that story of some of the awful things that took place with What Dreams May Come in the production. Just shows just how low Hollywood can go and how bad it is. Terry, this looks like a good question. Terry asked, it says, the Father is referred to, so who do we ask guidance from? You're asking guidance from the source or the higher portion of yourself. Imagine that a portion of yourself is actually God. That's what the spark of the Father being in you. It's buried within this flesh and all the other crap that the world and those things bring. You don't even know it exists. It's this distant, quiet voice that you will never hear unless you can really concentrate on hearing it. It's very much like the prophet Elijah spoke of, that quiet voice. That is Christ. That portion of the Father in you is Christ. In order for you to allow that voice, that portion of you to live, you die to this flesh, and then you can live in that. So when you're seeking that guidance, you're seeking it through yourself, your higher self. And believe me, the first day you meet, ask anybody that's done any Bufo trips or some LSD trips or ayahuasca or something, when they actually meet themselves, they'll refer to it as, I met myself. It's your higher self, your higher conscious state. It's actually a different entity than this physical one. That's your soul. You're actually talking to it. I know these are difficult things, but even physicists today are actually acknowledging this. So it's all very true. Bless all, Jane Foley says. Right on the way, horse says, his mom killed herself. Do not do that because it hurts the ones that you leave behind. It does. It causes things. So see, the whole point is that it causes karma that you can't even address because you're no longer here to address it. Lawrence says, I appreciate your commitment to truth. It's a really unpopular thing, Lawrence, so I appreciate that. Speaking truth is historically never a good thing for the person speaking it. Scrub says, is that why I talk to myself so much? Yes, it is, Scrub. By the way, Scrub, we're going to be in Pensacola here pretty soon. Malia and I are going to Pensacola. We are leaving the state because I can. It's good news. We're leaving the state and we're going to Pensacola to get some work done so we don't have to rely on you all the time to support us. Unfortunately, when we are working, we can't make these. We are trying to dedicate ourselves to making more videos because there's so much that we study and talk about. We could talk about this endlessly. And so we are going there to work. Now that's assuming that the credit system and everything is still functioning. Literally, we had that conversation the other night that said, that could definitely disrupt that trip. Depending on what happens. If there is a massive financial collapse again, things are going to get very, very ugly, and it's going to happen. They're preparing for it. Now, what they do in order to move values around dictates when it happens. But I'm telling you right now, the actions that they're doing right now are irreversible. They're irreversible. So even though it might feel like it calms down, that action still took place. The bomb still happened within the system. How it impacts that system will yet to be known until that time that it does actually begin tearing things down, because it works in an algorithm. It's like a logarithmic rhythm in the finance and how a fiat dollar actually functions. This is going to be, it will come up. It will be bad. When? I believe it will be completed on 10-10-10. That bomb will, and the existence of that bomb actually being detonated has sealed the fate of it. How long that takes and which signs to look for, we'll know. You can pay attention to the stock market. That's going to give you a little bit more detail, because it represents, for the most part, although it's a bit of an illusion, because only the banks are really propping up the values of these companies, not individual investors like you or me. So what it looks like in the future, I'll continually try to come back to you and give you some data to look at this and look at that and look at that and see these are the impacts of it. But I believe it's going to be happening much faster than we know. I don't like making predictions and saying, oh, well, this is a prophecy about something. I just, because there are way too many variables that determine timing within the factor, I would never say it'll happen on that date. Although I believe that they chose that date to complete their injections into, because it does represent something for them. Otherwise, they wouldn't have chosen that date. Let me see if there's any other questions I can answer before jumping out. Trying to scroll back through these. It doesn't look like Americans are aggressive. So Whitty Burns says Americans are aggressive and people think the yellow vest movement is bad. Geez. No, it's amazing. This country, they go, well, we'll stand up in a civil war against our corrupt government if it's ever needed. It is so beyond that time, folks. A civil war wouldn't even save you. It wouldn't save this system. It never would. In fact, the civil war will be caused by them. First, they'll let people kill themselves. Look, the result of the reality of the situation is they don't want the population to be as big as it is. They've already said that. They actively tell you that. They've engraved it on the Georgia Guidestones. So how does that happen? What does that persecution look like? Well, first, they starve you to death, and the people that kill themselves, like during the Great Depression, suicides excel. I mean, the amount of suicides during the Depression is amazing because people can't even eat. They don't want to starve to death. They'd rather kill themselves. So they'll do that and allow people to kill themselves. But then that economic standard or that economic situation will cause people to go against each other, just like Scripture says. They will kill each other. And then they'll actually, when things get really bad, they'll start doing other things like eating their own children, which we actually have evidence of that in our recent history, where in Germany, people were selling and eating their youngest children because the starvation was so bad. So we know that the humans are capable of it. You can't comprehend it right now, but take food away from you for 90 days and see, and then come back to me and tell me whether you feel bad about bringing it, which is why the specification about women bearing children during these days being not such a good thing, because you'll be confronted with that. You'll feel guilty for bringing your child into this country, and you won't feel guilt for taking them out because it's so bad. Yes, Bible says they will eat their own children. So these are the types of persecutions coming. But first, it's going to be more of our regulated system. So Magnanimous says, Derek, is the Apostle Paul a fraud? I have doubts about this guy. I've spoken about Paul many, many times. If you go back and you look, I call Paul the Antichrist. He helped build the Antichrist system, which is the Roman Catholic Church today, robbing Peter to pay Paul, taking what Peter was supposed to do. Paul did it. Paul takes everything that Peter did, including founding the church and all of that. So yes, he tells a lot of spiritual truths, Paul does, mixed with a bunch of things that I believe he was pressured to do on behalf of the Romans and the Hebrews. He was not, he has beautiful spiritual truths that he got from all of the Christians, the actual followers of the way that he had killed. He had killed many of them. So he definitely knows spiritual truths. Those are written. So you have to be able to rightly divide the word, rightly separate that which he says that supports the governing bodies and that he says which supports the spiritual nature of Christ, which we all know by now. Okay. Yes, Paul says that he lies to bring people to Christ. Yes. He also reversed the name from Jesus Christ to Christ Jesus. If you didn't know that reversal, that's kind of the Antichrist. Just a little thing. Just change somebody's name, even though Christ isn't his last name. But you get what I mean. Let me see. Focus on repentance and live to love. Yes. So again, I wanted to thank you all for coming and joining us today. Love you very much. Don't be shaken. Don't be moved. Stand strong. Ignore the haters in your own life. Ignore the haters in my life. And just know that all of this must come to pass. But let your hearts not be troubled. I love you very much. Look for Red Letter Disciples with Malia and I, and we've got some things we want to talk to you guys about. Hopefully we'll get to that today. We are preparing for our drive to Pensacola, so we may be stopping and seeing a bunch of people along the way, like Brenda Parker or Paula Amons or Dory or Hopi or wherever you're at along the way. If we cross by, we'd like to stop and see and have some fellowship with people along the way. And we'll come to you live. Hopefully, maybe we'll even come to you live. We'll stop the car. Maybe we'll do some live videos along the way if you don't mind. And continue with your love. Feed the family. Go on Discord today. Have the chats. We will have a chat answering any questions that anybody has about lies or whatever. I can answer them in there, but not going to turn this channel into a please love me ego fest for other people or myself. Love you very much, and we'll see you very soon.